Get ready to take your game mastering to a whole new level. This is the ACE Roleplaying Games channel, which presents the Simply GM, well, not quite podcast yet, because I'm not putting this out on pod, but the Simply GM more than regular, irregular podcast sort of thing. There we go. Anyway, hello, Acers. Welcome to the ACE Roleplaying Games channel. This is the official channel for the ACE Roleplaying Games Club. I'm your host, founder, and the main showrunner right now for all things ACE Roleplaying Games. I'm Mason Emerson, and this is the place where you, as teenagers and anybody else who can get a benefit from it, get to come here and learn more about role-playing games and how to game master them. Now, I've been focusing in on some examples, and these are just good examples as well. I'm focusing on the rule set for Savage Worlds, so this is part of the situational rules set. And as I'm going through these Simply GM episodes, these are specifically targeted right now at the Savage Worlds role-playing game. Now, down the road, I'd like to maybe do some other systems, some other games. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to look into Index Card RPG as one of the next ones that I look at for you guys, because frankly, Index Card is, next to Savage Worlds, one of the coolest game systems I've ever played. I will probably touch on the old World of Darkness series, because, well, that was one of my most favorite things that I ever played. It's something that I remember playing and having possibly one of the best times of my life, because I got to play with the grown-up teens and young 20-somethings at the college, and then also I got to play World of Darkness with my Lehigh group that evolved while I was on my mission. So, and then see previous videos for me talking about the evolution of my Lehigh group. But today, I want to continue with helping you to kind of see situational times and how to use certain rules. So let's start today with readying weapons. Now, one of the things about weapons is you don't always have them out. I don't walk around with a gun in my hand if I'm going through a modern mystery, unless I'm in a situation that I think might get dangerous. Otherwise, it's usually in my holster right here or down on my hip. I don't walk around with a sword in my hand all the time, or a knife, or what if somebody accidentally runs into me? If I'm always walking around with my knife out or my dagger, somebody runs into me, they skewer themselves on my knife. Now I got a lot more than saying, "Oh, excuse me, I kind of walked into you there." So let's talk about readying weapons. And for Savage Worlds, which this is not sponsored by them, this is their copyrighted material. Again, if you really want the full set and the full explanation of the rules, get the rule book. And okay, I will put in this plug and I'll put a link to it down below. But right now is the time to get in on Savage Worlds. And it is an awesome time to get in, because they're celebrating 20 years of their rules of some sort being around. Came out in 2003. I still have that book, and I've mentioned it before. And then they've continued to modify it, make it better. I mean, this version that we're on right now has been out for 5 years. 5 years in like November or December. But it's been out for 5 years. And in that 5 years, I have had so much more fun than with almost any other gaming system that I ever played before. And that even includes some of the experiences I had playing Mage the Ascension. So it's right up there. So what we're going to talk about here with, or getting to the rest of this note here, get into Savage Worlds now. They're putting out a 5th printing of the Savage Worlds core rulebook, which is $40, just like regular. But it's on Kickstarter, so you can get the version that's got all the updates added in. I think they stopped calling it errata, even though that's what the technical term for it is. But it's got all the updates in it. So check out this Kickstarter that's below. Again, I'm not sponsored by these guys, but wow, is it a thing to get in on. And if you get in now, you're going to get player's guides too. So back to where I was before about readying weapons. Being as you don't always have it, you need to sometimes get it ready. And you can actually ready up to 2 items as a free action per turn. So that means drawing it or holstering it or moving it from an easy to reach place. Now, that doesn't mean, and that does mean picking it up. And it's an action for any number of items after you've readied or set up 2 things. So if you've already pulled this, if you holster this gun because it's out of bullets, and you go down and you can grab your ankle holster gun still. But if you run out of bullets there and you go to grab this one on your side, then that's a third one that costs you your action. But or getting an item from a difficult location is also an action. So, and this I would actually want to read verbatim, just because I've seen some debates on this, and really, if say your sword's been knocked out of your hand, ping, 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 and you're trying not to get hit, that's going to take an action for you to bend over and pick up your sword and resume the fight. So, or again, the ankle holster is an example, because that's a difficult to reach location. Whereas if you're right-handed, under your left arm, if you're left-handed, under your right arm, if it's on your hip, if it's in a back holster, if it's over the shoulder, shing, those places are easy to pull. Knives, daggers, swords, guns, they're easy to pull from. But like I said, in the ankle or in a, like, if it's been dropped, you're going to need to spend an action to bend over and pick it up off the floor. So that's something that I heard debated, like I said, and I really think that that's a very good one to be clear about. So let's talk now about recoil. And recoil is a real thing in real life. If you are firing okay, let me put it this way. A .22 handgun, which is a fun gun to shoot, it has so little recoil that you can pretty much keep it on target and snap, 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 snap. It's not going to buck much in your hands. A 9mm, on the other hand, or 380, 9mm, those ones in there, those ones, boom, they kind of have a little bit of a pop to them, and you have to put your sights back on your target, but not too bad. A 40 or a 45, a little bit more. But I shot once a .454 Casul. The barrel was about the gun barrel was about that long. And then the cylinder was about that big around, and those bullets, they were bigger than my thumb. And that thing went boom. And so that's not actually figured into Savage Worlds, but I like to put that in there. If somebody is playing in an old West game, they've got a big old hand cannon that does, like, because I would even let the bullet do 2d8 damage. But, or have it do 2d6 plus 6 or something like that. But they would have a recoil penalty, because that hand cannon, that was something else. Like, I had never shot one of those before, and we used to, I don't think I've shot another one since, but that thing was huge. And so the same thing happens with rifles. Boom. Now, the way they use recoil in Savage Worlds is they look at firing something that has a rate of fire greater than 1. This is where we can talk about rate of fire for a second. Rate of fire means that when you pull the trigger, a bullet shoots out. Now, if you're shooting a muzzle loader, for example, there's no way you're going to get that thing rate of fire greater than 1. For that matter, you can't, say you're doing a multi-action and you want to do a multi-action with a black powder rifle. Not going to happen, because and the black powder rifle is a natural descendant of the original cannons, hand cannons, literally. So let's think about kind of that quick evolution. They figure out how to mix saltpeter with naphtha, and the Chinese make gunpowder. They use it mainly for like fireworks and cute explosives, and maybe might have used it for early cannon. But it was barrel makers, and it was bell makers who were the first ones, and actually it's barrel makers because of the rings around the barrels of the wooden cannons. That's the reason why we refer to the tube out of which a bullet or projectile shoots as a barrel. So that's something I just learned. So, and that's the other thing. As a game master, make sure that you are always learning. Always pay attention to the world around you because it's a fascinating and wonderful world we live in. And when you pay attention, you're going to pick up cute little things, and you're going to have little thoughts and ideas in your head, and you're going to be able to put that in somewhere where you never thought you would. So anyway, as these cannon that like was it Philip the Second? I can't remember which. There was one of the French kings is the first one to figure out, oh, if I put wheels the right way underneath these cannon, I can really knock down castle walls. And that's actually what ended building the big magnificent castles, was these big cannon. And then they started figuring out to make them smaller and smaller until they took it and put it on a crossbow body, and then they took a match and lit it, and then they had a fork out front on a pole that you had to rest it on, and you boom. So those were kind of the first muskets. And then things get better and better, and they're getting better and better with having the triggers and everything, and then the matchlocks come in, boom. And then the next kind of technology, going back to where I started here, is the black powder rifle. Now the flintlock was kind of cool because you'd have, and this is the principles of building any bullet. So kind of, again, put these in your head. You start with a clean, cool barrel first. If the barrel's still too hot, do not load your black powder rifle. Second, and that's why we'll see sometimes at fast black powder shoots, they'll blow down the barrel to just kind of cool it down, and also to blow out any other crud in the bottom. But that's neither here nor there. So you start with your empty barrel, and you measure out of your powder horn or your powder container. And my dad actually had a real horn that had been turned into a powder holder, and it had a little nodule thing on the front that you could push down, and it would dispense exactly the right amount of powder. But anyway, so you'd put so many grains of powder. They're called grains, but it's so many measured grains or grams or ounces of powder into your barrel first, followed by a patch, followed by maybe a second patch, depending on if you're two patching it or single patching it, and then your bullet. Now, a lot of the first early bullets were just round cast lead balls, but they did start to evolve into a kind of a cone with ribs on the back. And what you would do is then you push that into your lubed patch. And sometimes to lubricate your patch, you just stick it in your mouth and suck on it to get it wet so it would slide down the barrel. Other times, you'd actually soak it in like an oil or something like that to get it to go up, to get it to go down your barrel well. So you put your patches on, you put your bullet on, and then sometimes you'd put another patch on top of that, other times you wouldn't. And then you'd take your ramrod and you'd put it on top of the ball and you'd smack it down the barrel. And sometimes it takes both hands, so you'd have to like prop it up against your leg and smack it down the barrel. But usually it's just enough to smack it down the barrel with one hand. Now my dad, on the rifle that I won a shooting contest at Fort Bridger with when I was 13, he had a brass ramrod on that thing. So it had, you could smack that ball and it'd slide down the barrel because of the weight of the ramrod. But you could usually use a wooden ramrod with brass tips. You'd smooth that down the barrel till a point that it stopped moving because it's jammed up against that powder at the bottom. Now, you pull the ramrod out because you don't want to shoot your ramrod, and you put it back in the ramrod holder, or you just drop it on the ground or stick it in the ground, depending on how fast you're needing to shoot these shot. And then you take it, and the first black powder rifles had a flintlock. So after the matchlock, after that one that had it was a wheeled it was a wheel that moved around the burning match that would touch the powder in the pan, which was an open pan. So it'd come around and touch that powder. It'd light into the barrel and shoot the shot off. And then came the flintlock that put a cover over that pan of a finer powder, and the flint would come down, strike a plate, and push on the spring and scrape down, causing sparks all the way down. Sparks would hit the powder. The powder would leap into the main powder inside the rifle, and it would go off. Now, this is what caused battlefields in like the Revolutionary War and the Civil War to be really covered in smoke, because you're having a lot of the priming powder that's going off, poof, and then your shot goes off. So that's another idea to kind of keep in your mind. How fast and how much is being shot? And if it's black powder, it's making a big, messy cloud. And it smells pretty weird too. It eventually evolved, though, into a little priming cap that you would put on you would put it on a post. I don't know that I can even say what the actual post is called, because it is the correct term for it. However, yeah, it might get me in trouble with somebody if I actually said what it is. You can look it up. Anyway, and so it just made it so when the hammer struck down on it, that would cause the spark that would go in and ignite the main powder. The main powder would, boom, shoot that ball out. Now, in Savage Worlds, and this gets into the next thing. So I'll get back to recoil in just a second here, because this actually goes into reloading. If you go back to in Savage Worlds, if you have a black powder rifle, it takes so many turns, so it has a reload time. It takes so many turns to reload that black powder rifle. I believe in Savage Worlds, I'm going to look it up right now. Okay, so reload time is on. Okay, so for a black powder rifle, reload is 4 rounds. And that's a long time. Even a flintlock pistol takes at least 1 to 2 rounds to reload. And so a Kentucky long rifle, takes 4 rounds to reload. It does 2d8 damage when it hits, and it has an armor piercing factor even and everything. And that's partially because it was rifled. And the short version of that is, if it's got a smooth barrel, it can actually cause the bullet to just kind of wander as it goes out. But when they twisted it, they found that, and I think it was Germans who figured it out at first, when you twist the inside of the barrel and the bullet starts to spin inside the barrel as it's being pushed out by that powder, then when it goes boom, that makes that bullet travel a lot straighter. So the reload time on a Kentucky long rifle is 4 rounds. So other things have a reload time, like crossbows and things like that. So the idea of nocking an arrow or loading a stone in a sling, those are free actions. And you can do a free action every round, every action. But reloading a crossbow bolt, reloading a clip, which just make sure, then, because this is something that was drilled into my head by my uncle who was a Green Beret, my mom's uncle who was a Green Beret in Vietnam. He was a pretty big stickler on this terminology. And a lot of books and games and movies do this. They refer to a clip. A clip is a metal bracket that holds a group of bullets together. And it uses, the weapon typically that uses a clip is fed by an internal spring mechanism to push the next bullet into firing position. At which point, when the clip is empty, it will shoot it out. The best example I can give you of that is an M1 Garand from World War I. You would put a clip of 8 bullets, slam it in there. you'd fire, bang, 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 bang. And on the 8th shot, bang, it would fling, and it'd flip out that metal clip. You'd grab your next clip and slam it in there. Now, the idea of something that uses the recoil of the weapon, recoil is the pushback caused by the bullet being pushed forward and the explosion that's pushing it forward. It's going to have that thrust on the bullet because this is what it is, and it's going to have the pushback into your body because everything that's going that way with force is also putting force back this way, and so it'll go into your shoulder. Boom. That's what a rifle's supposed to do. And when that recoil happens, what somebody really smarter than me, that's for sure, figured out after they made cartridge bullets. So that's like the next step after black powders. They make cartridge bullets, which is they take that powder, they omit the patches, and they just crimp in the bullet, which is now a cone, into the front end of the bullet shell. And the first bullets that were cartridges came from the idea of, because during the Civil War they actually would take all that black powder in the patch and the ball, and they'd wrap it up in newspaper and twist the ends so that when it came time, you'd rip off, sometimes even with your teeth, you'd rip off the back end, pour the powder down, flip it over, and slam it down in, and it sped the shooter up by quite a bit. And so they could fire faster. They could reload faster. So that would take that reload time of a 4. I'd take it down to a 3 rounds, or maybe even 2 rounds if the person specializes in it, like takes an edge in it or something like that. So that is where the rifle got a little bit faster. Then somebody said, well, hey, why don't we just make these things out of metal? And they used brass, and they made it so that priming thing, that the thing that starts the main powder, was initially just kind of it was all over. It was I'm forgetting one of my terms here. But basically, like a 22, anywhere you strike on the base of the bullet will activate the priming powder. The priming powder will activate the main charge powder, and the charge powder will throw the bullet. So the next step was the primer, and that was a little tiny explosive piece of metal with explosive in it that was put in the center, making a center fire. Oh, those are rim fires. That's the term I was looking for. See, if you stop trying to think about something and you think of something else, you'll remember the other thing you were trying to think of. Anyway, so those are rim fires, like 22 and the 45 caliber bullet for the McHenry rifle. And then you get center fires, which are like what they put in the Winchester. And that was one of the first. They were called repeating rifles because you could drop the lever. They were a lever action repeating rifle because you could drop the lever and reload the bullet really fast. And it was fed by an internal spring, and you'd load what was called the magazine. Now, a magazine is something that has an internal spring, and that is usually what you put in the bottom of your handgun or into a faster firing, larger gun. You just usually load just a magazine. And then I would also apply reloading times to if you have a team operating a machine gun and they run out of bullets and they're ready to put in the next strip of bullets, give them 1 round of reloading time. So just think about it. If it's an easy to do thing, because I can, with my handgun, I can drop a magazine, and while I'm dropping the magazine with my thumb over here on my right hand, I'm pulling the next magazine up with my left hand. I have my index finger up the front, and this magazine is dropped. I pull in the next one. I slam it home. In one smooth action, I keep going back. I grab the top of the action and I release it so it slides back forward. So the slide goes back forward and it chambers the next bullet, because that's what the next thing happened was somebody figured out how to use recoil to make it so and it was probably like John Browning was one of the first people to figure this out. He was really cool. But anyway, and I mean, still to this day, the machine gun used by the United States military is what's called a Modus M2 machine gun. It shoots a 50 caliber round, so that's a pretty big round. And that was something designed back about World War I time. So that was one of the very first machine guns, and it's really effective and good, very accurate, things like that. But anyway, so that's what happens is now you can, every time you pull the trigger, so a handgun that isn't an automatic handgun will still have a rate of fire of 1. So you still will not have to suffer a recoil penalty. But here's the kicker. If you fire something that has a rate of fire of like 2 or 3, usually 3 is about the highest rate of fire you'll get. And that's actually saying that you're shooting off around 10 rounds is the equivalent of a 3. But when you shoot something that has a rate of fire of 2, here's how you do it in Savage Worlds. First of all, you roll your wild die, because if you're the character, if your character's the one shooting it, if they're a wild card. And now, if they're not, then don't roll the wild die. So the wild die will be included. Second, you also roll your shooting die for each part of the rate of fire that you are taking advantage of. So if it's a rate of fire of 3, like an AK-47, that is a machine gun, operates on recoil, and you can hold down the trigger and it will fire. Sound effects are included for free. Anyway, so you hold down that trigger and it fires multiple times. And you can go through a whole magazine of like 30 rounds in just a few seconds. So to represent, though, something that can fire that fast, an AK-47 is a rate of fire 3 weapon. So is an M16, things like that. Anyway, so if I'm running a wild card bad guy and he's got an AK-47, and he's got a shooting of D8. Let's take that example. So I'm going to roll his wild die, his shooting die, but also his shooting die and his shooting die. So I'm rolling 4 dice. That D6 wild die can replace any one of these 3. So that rate of fire means that I'm rolling all 4 of those dice, and that I am going to now suffer some recoil. So my target number, which normally would be 4, suffers a recoil penalty of -2 on each of the shooting rolls. So now my rate of fire is, well, it wouldn't be 6, because that's only if I'm shooting a rate of fire of 2. It's actually going to be 8, because I'm shooting rate of fire of 3. However, for every bullet that hits, and like we covered in the earlier video about rate of fire, for every bullet that hits, that is 1 set of damage dice you roll. But also remember, they have to hit on an 8 or better. So unless you choose to like flip the selector switch to single shot, and you can do single shot. Recoil is not cumulative between actions. So if you shoot rate of fire 3 on one action, then switch to single shot, you ignore rate of fire on the next round. So I know I kind of jumped around a little bit and gave you a little more history about guns than maybe you thought you might want, but it'll also help you be a better game master. And that's what I'm here to do, is help you be a better game master. So just remember, the world is always a better place because you're in it. And if no one's told you this today, I love you. I am so grateful that you join me here every time I put up another video. And I want you to know that you are amazing. And I hope that you are finding ways of getting better and better at your game mastering. I'm glad to help you with specific instances of things that you want to look at. Message me below. And everyone, thank you again for being a part of ACE Roleplaying Games. I will see you in the next video. And until then, we're gaming for good.